Okay, so you want to own a coffee shop. You walk past one on a morning weekday. The line is out the door. People are waiting 15 to 20 minutes to order. Every customer is buying something. A coffee costs $5 to $7. A pastry costs $4 to $8. A breakfast sandwich costs $8 to $12. The average customer transaction is $12 to $15. The shop does 300 to 500 transactions per day. That's $3,600 to $7,500 in daily revenue. Over a month, that's $108,000 to $225,000. Over a year, that's $1.3 million to $2.7 million in annual revenue from a 1,000 to 1,500 square foot space. The margins look extraordinary. You're essentially selling hot water with beans in it for $6 each. You're selling wheat flour and sugar for $7 each. The cost of goods seems minimal compared to the price. It sounds like owning a printing press that prints money on every transaction. It sounds like owning a coffee shop in 2010 when specialty coffee was booming, when third-wave coffee was becoming mainstream, when coffee prices were rising, and when anyone with capital and a good location could build a thriving business. That is exactly the comparison people are making right now. The coffee shop industry generates over $225 billion annually in the United States. There are over 40,000 coffee shops operating. Starbucks alone has over 16,000 locations globally. Independent specialty coffee shops are proliferating in every major city. The demand seems infinite. People need coffee every morning. It's habitual. It's required. The business model seems recession-proof. But here's what is actually happening on the ground, inside coffee shops when the cameras are off and the actual financial statements are open. The reality of owning a coffee shop is completely different from what the packed morning rush suggests. Some coffee shops are making money. Many are barely breaking even. And a significant number are quietly losing money every month despite appearing to be wildly busy. The gap between the few that thrive and the vast majority that fail comes down to a handful of things that almost nobody explains before you invest $300,000 to $800,000 in equipment and location. By the end of this, you will know exactly where the money comes from, where it disappears to, what the real margin numbers are, and what separates the coffee shops that generate returns from the ones that became expensive lessons in the gap between revenue and profitability. What a coffee shop actually sells. The margin collapse. People assume that owning a coffee shop means you're selling expensive coffee to customers who will pay premium prices. You are. But you're not making the margins you think you are. If you're selling coffee at market rates, the gross margin is much thinner than the per-cup price suggests. What a coffee shop actually sells is location convenience and the social experience of being in a coffee shop. The customer isn't paying $6 for the coffee. The customer is paying $6 for the right to occupy a seat, use the Wi-Fi, and be in an environment where they can work or meet friends. But here's the brutal truth that most coffee shop owners don't understand until they're drowning in losses. The customer is paying $6 per cup across 200 to 300 cups per day. But the shop is paying $3,500 to $8,000 per month in rent for a good location. That's $1.75 to $4 per cup per day in location cost alone just to open the door. A $6 cup of coffee with $2.50 in cost of goods becomes a $5.25 to $6.75 per cup profit requirement just to cover rent. Add labor, utilities, and other costs and the required margin becomes impossible to achieve at scale. The secondary brutal truth is that coffee shops have a fundamental problem. They're location-dependent and competition-dependent. Put a coffee shop on a busy corner and it thrives. Put the same coffee shop 2 blocks away and it struggles. A new competitor opening nearby destroys volume overnight. Customers shop on convenience and habit. A new shop steals your traffic. When you're vulnerable to geographic competition and dependent on location-specific traffic, your margins are always under pressure. The full upfront investment. What actually costs money? Everyone talks about the espresso machine cost. Nobody talks about everything else that eats capital before the first cup is sold. Real estate and lease. $20,000 to $100,000 upfront. A coffee shop needs foot traffic. Ground floor location. High visibility. Parking proximity. Commercial rent is $3,000 to $10,000 per month in most desirable locations. First month, last month, and security deposit consume $9,000 to $30,000. Build-out requires plumbing for water/drainage, electrical for machines, flooring, walls, professional interior design. Cost, $40,000 to $200,000. Espresso machine and equipment. $20,000 to $80,000. A quality espresso machine costs $8,000 to $20,000. Grinders cost $2,000 to $8,000. Brewing equipment, steamers, water systems, ice makers, refrigeration, POS system, ovens for pastries. Professional setup, $20,000 to $80,000. Furniture and fixtures, $15,000 to $50,000. Tables, chairs, stools, shelving, counters, lighting, design elements. Professional coffee shops invest in aesthetic. Cost, $15,000 to $50,000. Initial inventory, $8,000 to $25,000. Coffee beans in bulk. Milk supply, syrups, whipped cream, pastries, food items. Initial stock to start operations. Cost, $8,000 to $25,000. Licenses and permits, $3,000 to $15,000. Health department permits. Food service license, business license, electrical inspection, building permits. Varies by jurisdiction. Cost, $3,000 to $15,000. Point of sale and technology, $8,000 to $25,000. POS system, credit card processing, loyalty program software, inventory management, Wi-Fi infrastructure, security system. Cost, $8,000 to $25,000. Insurance, $3,000 to $10,000 annually. General liability, workers' compensation, product liability, property insurance. Cost, $3,000 to $10,000 per year. Signage and branding, $10,000 to $30,000. Exterior signage, logo design, menu boards, brand identity. Cost, $10,000 to $30,000. Initial staff training and marketing, $15,000 to $40,000. Barista training, customer service training, initial payroll during ramp-up, grand opening marketing. Cost, $15,000 to $40,000. Working capital buffer, $30,000 to $100,000. Reserve for operating expenses during ramp-up. Payroll, inventory, equipment repairs, contingencies. The real total investment. For a legitimate independent coffee shop, the total upfront investment is $200,000 to $600,000 depending on location and equipment quality. Most operators finance 50% to 70% through SBA loans or personal capital. A $400,000 investment at 7% interest over 10 years is $4,700 per month in debt service, or $56,400 per year. Where the money actually goes. The operating cost reality. Once you're open, the costs are relentless. And this is where the coffee shop business reveals why margins collapse. Rent/facility costs, 25% to 40% of revenue. A $4,500 monthly lease on a coffee shop generating $150,000 monthly revenue is 3%. But that's at high utilization. Most coffee shops hit peak hours 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. That's 5 hours of high volume, 13 hours of low volume. Average utilization is much lower. A $4,500 lease on $100,000 monthly revenue is 4.5%. On $80,000, it's 5.6%. Most independent coffee shops generate $80,000 to $120,000 monthly revenue. Rent is 4% to 6% of revenue in good locations, higher in mediocre locations. Labor, 30% to 40% of revenue, realistically 35% to 50%. This is where most coffee shops get destroyed. You need skilled baristas. They earn $16 to $25 per hour. You need 4 to 7 employees working shifts to cover morning rush, midday, and afternoon. At $20 average per hour with benefits and taxes, you're spending $15,000 to $25,000 monthly in labor for a mid-sized shop. On $100,000 revenue, that's 15% to 25% of revenue. On peak revenue days and hours, labor is 10% to 15%. On slow days, labor is 30% to 50%. Average across all hours, 25% to 40%. Cost of goods sold, 25% to 35% of revenue. Coffee beans, milk, syrups, pastries, food items. A $5 latte with 80 cents in beans, 60 cents in milk, 25 cents in cup and lid, 10 cents in syrups is $1.75 in COGS. On a $5 selling price, that's 35% COGS. A $4 cappuccino with $1.50 in COGS is 37.5% COGS. Pastries might be 25% COGS if you buy wholesale. Food items might be 30% to 35%. Blended across all products, 25% to 35% COGS. Utilities, 3% to 6% of revenue. Electricity for machines, water heating, refrigeration, lighting. A coffee shop running equipment constantly uses significant utilities. Cost, 3% to 6% of revenue. Equipment maintenance and repairs, 3% to 8% of revenue. Espresso machines break. Grinders need maintenance. Refrigeration fails. Water filtration needs replacement. Regular maintenance is essential. Budget, 3% to 8% of revenue. Credit card processing, 2% to 3% of revenue. Most transactions are card-based. Processing fees add up. On $100,000 monthly revenue, that's $2,000 to $3,000. Marketing and customer acquisition, 2% to 5% of revenue. Digital advertising. Loyalty programs, local partnerships, social media. Most established shops rely on location foot traffic. New shops need marketing. Cost, 2% to 5% of revenue. Professional services and compliance, 1% to 2% of revenue. Accounting, tax preparation, legal matters, health inspections. Cost, 1% to 2% of revenue. The monthly revenue and cost reality for a typical coffee shop. A well-located independent coffee shop with good morning traffic. Average transaction, $12 transactions per day. 250. High-performing shop. Operating days, 25 per month. Closed 5 days. Monthly transactions, 250 times 25 is equal to 6,250 monthly revenue. 6,250 times $12 equals $75,000. Now the costs. Cost of goods sold, 30%, $22,500. Gross profit, $52,500. Rent, 6% of revenue, $4,500. Labor, 35%, $26,250. Utilities, $3,000. Equipment maintenance, $2,500. Credit card processing, 2.5%, $1,875. Marketing, $1,500. Professional services, $750. Miscellaneous, 5%, $3,750. Total operating costs, $44,125. Net operating profit, $8,375. Annual operating profit, $100,500. Less debt service, $4,700 per month, $56,400. Annual net profit, $44,100. This coffee shop with $75,000 in monthly revenue nets $3,675 per month or $44,100 per year. That's a 5.9% net margin on $900,000 annual revenue. For a business requiring $400,000 in capital and your personal presence 6 days per week running operations, this return is underwhelming. What coffee shop owners don't account for? The brutal reality's morning rush is only 4 to 5 hours. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. is peak. You do 60% to 70% of daily volume in these 4 hours. You need full staffing. Midday is slower. Afternoon is even slower. Evening is dead. You're paying for full shift coverage even when the shop is half empty. Seasonal volatility. Fall and winter are peak coffee season. Spring and summer are slower. Your revenue can fluctuate $20,000 to $40,000 monthly seasonally. But rent is constant. During slow months, profit becomes loss. Competition destroys margin. A new coffee shop opens. Another coffee chain enters the market. Suddenly your traffic is split. Your revenue drops 20% to 40%. You've already committed to rent and staff. You can't adjust quickly. You're underwater. Brand loyalty is low. Unlike gas stations where customers are loyal to location convenience, coffee shop customers are fickle. They'll drive an extra 5 minutes for a new shop. They'll switch for 50 cents price difference. Loyalty is weak. You need constant marketing to maintain traffic. Equipment failures are catastrophic. An espresso machine breaks. You can't make specialty drinks. Customers leave. A grinder fails. You grind by hand or close. A refrigerator fails. Milk spoils. You're out thousands in repairs plus lost revenue. Equipment failure impacts revenue immediately. The coffee shop that actually works financially you open in an ultra-premium location with massive foot traffic. You achieve 400 transactions daily at $15 average. Monthly revenue $150,000. You're efficient on labor, $45,000 per month. COGS, $45,000. Rent, $5,000. Other costs, $10,000. Monthly profit, $45,000. Annual profit, $540,000. Now it works, but this requires perfect location and exceptional execution. Most shops don't achieve this. Alternatively, you own multiple locations and spread overhead. One manager oversees 2 to 3 shops. Marketing is consolidated. Purchasing is larger. Per location margins improve 30% to 40%. The bad scenario. The more common outcome, you open a coffee shop in a secondary location for $400,000 invested. Initial traffic is decent. You do 150 transactions per day at $12 average. Monthly revenue, $45,000. Operating costs are $38,000. Operating profit, $7,000. Debt service, $4,700. Monthly net, $2,300. You're barely making $28,000 per year on a $400,000 investment. That's a 7% return while working 60+ hours weekly. Year 2. A competitor opens nearby. Traffic drops to 100 transactions daily. Revenue $30,000. Operating costs remain $38,000. You're losing $8,000 per month. By month 8 of year 2, you've accumulated $64,000 in cumulative losses. You're considering closing. Most coffee shops in secondary locations close within 3 to 5 years. The hidden cost nobody discusses. Your time coffee shops require owner presence. You're there at 5:30 a.m. You're there until close at 8 p.m. You're working 14 to 16-hour days. Your annual profit of $44,100 on $400,000 capital is actually $44,100 divided by 3,000 hours worked equals $14.70 per hour. You're working below minimum wage. If you paid someone else to do your job, you'd pay $50,000 plus annually. Your coffee shop is generating $6,000 per year in owner profit after accounting for your labor cost. The structural advantage of chains and franchises. Starbucks. Local chains and franchises succeed because they have leverage, purchasing power, standardized systems, multiple locations spreading overhead. A single independent shop can't compete on these factors. Starbucks can source milk cheaper than you. Starbucks can finance growth. Starbucks can weather competition. An independent operator can't. This is why independents face structural disadvantage. Conclusion. The actual economics of coffee shop ownership. Owning a coffee shop is a capital-intensive food service business with modest margins, high fixed costs, and extreme vulnerability to location-based competition. Most independent coffee shops generate 5% to 10% net margins. Combined with the owner's labor value, real profit is often 0 or negative. The money in coffee goes to 4 groups. First, coffee suppliers capturing margin on beans. Second, real estate owners capturing high rent from location premiums. Third, chain operators with multiple locations spreading overhead. Fourth, independent operators in exceptional locations who execute flawlessly. The separation between coffee shops that generate returns and those that barely survive comes down to 3 factors. Location selection so exceptional that volume overcomes margin pressure. Multi-location operations spreading overhead. Exceptional operational efficiency and labor management. A single independent coffee shop in a secondary location with mediocre traffic will almost certainly generate disappointing returns. The location doesn't have enough volume to generate sufficient profit. Competition from chains and other independents compresses pricing. The owner's labor isn't compensated. The return on capital is underwhelming. Here's the brutal reality that coffee shop romantics won't acknowledge. Opening a coffee shop is an emotionally attractive business. You picture yourself behind the espresso machine. You imagine loyal customers. You dream of building community. But the financial reality is harsh. Most independent coffee shops generate $40,000 to $80,000 in annual owner profit on $400,000 invested. That's a 10% to 20% return if you don't account for your labor. It's a negative return if you do. You'd make more money investing in an index fund and working a regular job. If you're considering opening a coffee shop, understand that you're not just starting a business. You're buying a lifestyle. The lifestyle is working 60+ hours per week for modest financial return. If that appeals to you, great. Just don't fool yourself into thinking you're going to get rich selling coffee. You're not. The real margin numbers are disturbing precisely because they show how much value you're destroying through personal labor for a business that barely generates profit.